Ever since I knew I was going to revamp Let's Remember into something more than critical Let's Plays, I knew that the first episode needed to be about Skygunner. Why's that? That's why. Skygunner is possibly the brightest lost gem of the 6th console generation. Released on September 27, 2001 in Japan by Sony, the game is probably better known by its North American release, where it was published by Atlus USA. In fact, most people associate it with Atlus and call it an Atlus game, but it was actually developed by Pixel Arts. Although, considering that all my research into their background only ever listed Skygunner as their single-released game, that's probably not saying much. The game is set in the town of Rive, a fictional cross between Paris and Venice. The player controls one of 3 gunners, Femme, Ciel, or Copan, as they do aerial battle against the forces of Master Thief Ventre. You see, there's a big expo coming to the city, and the crown jewel is the Eternal Engine, a perpetual motion device. Before too long, Ventre strikes, and our heroes rush to their trusty planes and take off to the skies in order to thwart his efforts. Each hero's airplane has a variety of pros and cons, including special abilities. The game itself is pretty short, a solid 2 hours per character if you're not skipping the cutscenes, but the difference of play between all 3 characters makes for radically different experiences. Character stories weave in and out of each other, and mission objectives shift depending on who you play as, creating a story that has really exciting highs no matter who you're playing as. Femme's the beginner character, and my favorite to play as. Her special ability is the active turn, which allows you to quickly orient yourself back towards your target. Skygunner's lock-on camera system goes a long way to making the experience flow better than other third-person 3D dogfighters like Star Fox 64 or Crimson Skies. At any given point, you can lock on to a target, and it will always remain in view. Some players might find this a little disorientating at first, and it's a matter that's only complicated more by the game's highly sensitive controls. A single flip of the analog stick can send your gunner's aim flying about the screen. But Femme's a great introductory character for solving these problems. Her special ability helps players who are adjusting to the camera quickly find their way back to their targets. You can turn off the lock-on camera and go for a view that centers behind your tail, and while this does come in handy from time to time, the game largely teaches players how to adjust by giving them the ability to easily correct mistakes while playing as Femme. Her campaign is a little easier too. Partner AI helps a little more, and many of her character-specific objectives focus on clearing out small escort fighter squadrons, and not the larger, tougher enemies that Ciel or Copan have to deal with. Ciel is, in theory anyway, the next step up in difficulty. His plane isn't as sturdy as Femme's, and it's a little harder to turn, but he gets a devastating special ability: heavy fire. At any given time, you can hit the brakes, stop on a dime, and unleash a massive barrage of bullets. It's great for taking out groups of fighters, but it's also really good for taking out larger, more hardened targets as well. It's also another really smart skill to give the player because it continues the pattern of teaching them how to dogfight intelligently. Heavy fire requires that you come to a full stop, which leaves you exposed to all sorts of enemy fire. Playing as Ciel teaches you a lot about how to approach enemies from the right attack vectors. Skygunner is a game that expects and encourages multiple playthroughs, and each new character emphasizes important skills that will eventually allow you to turn into a verified ace. This is no more clear than with the final pilot of the trio, Copan. His plane is blisteringly fast. You have to make sure that you know exactly where you're going at any given time. His machine guns are also tuned much tighter than his comrades, so your aim needs to be near perfect. But what he also has is a special maneuver called the Vortex. Here, Copan will spin his plane in a technique that will give him a small period of invulnerability, while also damaging nearby enemies. He's marked as a character for expert players, but it's surprisingly easy to adjust to playing as him. His modes of interaction help the player learn how to establish a rhythm that will eventually get them high scores no matter what character they play as. Score is a major component of Skygunner, and it's tied, largely, to resource management. Whenever a gunner uses an attack, it costs money, down to firing their basic machine guns. Characters have various sub-weapons that they can use as well. Everyone has access to firework and dog missiles. The former explode in a fantastic display and are great for taking out groups of enemies, giving a big combo bonus. The latter slow down enemies, and while they're not the most useful, they can still come in handy during certain moments. Does a cannon only have a weak point on the back? Fire off a dog missile and attack while they're slowed down. Femme and Ciel also have access to cross missiles. A full lock-on with one of these bad boys sends a giant projectile towards the enemy that can then be detonated with machine gun fire for a ton of damage. It allows the two to compete with Copan, who gets a very powerful sub-weapon, the pumpkin bombs, which dive down and strike an enemy hard. At the end of every mission, the game counts how much you've used your sub-weapons. Too many and you're going to lose quite a bit of money. But don't think about spamming them when you have extra. Too much too fast will overheat your engine, leaving you unable to boost and heavily exposed to enemy attack. All of this turns Skygunner into an intelligent game that rewards situational awareness. Throughout the campaign, the three gunners are in a friendly competition of sorts, and if you want to beat the AI, you'll need to know exactly what weapons to use and when. It's easy to go overboard and fall way behind the other gunners. Now, most of the time, this competition is just a way to encourage smart play, but occasionally the game does hand out rewards if you're the top gunner. For instance, making the most cash in one section of the game rewards you with a powerful engine upgrade. One of the keys to being a good gunner is to be mindful of your surroundings and create chain reactions. By taking out enemies that position themselves in lines or in other clusters, you can link the explosion from a single demise into a larger chain that does catastrophic damage to all enemies around it. It saves a ton of ammo and gives you major bonus points. One of my least favorite things about Skygunner, design-wise, is how long it takes to teach the player about this very important mechanic. There's no real explanation in Femme's campaign, and while chain reactions become the only way to damage some bosses when you're playing as Ciel or Copan, the game really sits on teaching a technique that allows the player to be competitive. It's a major slip-up, especially considering how often other mechanics or special abilities teach the player how to play intelligently, or at least to play competently. This is far from being Skygunner's largest weak point though, even if the game truly does have issues with conveyance from time to time. No, sadly, the major limitation here is the PlayStation 2 itself. Skygunner is kind of greedy, I guess? It really loves particle effects, and it loves to have tons of actors on screen at once. This causes major frame rate issues. When the game is running at a smooth 60 frames per second, the dogfighting is absolutely balletic and piloting is a blast. But when the game chokes down to the lower bounds of 10 or 15 frames, it's a huge problem, and one that only grows as set pieces get more and more elaborate. Some players are certain to find the drops way too obtrusive to continue playing. I almost quit a couple times trying to get some footage. If ever a game would benefit from an HD remake, I think it would be Skygunner. There is a cheat code for locking the frame rate, but the downside is that it turns the game into an ugly mess. For all of the potential downsides, a somewhat unfair difficulty level, nigh unplayable moments brought about by poor frame rate, and a lack of communication about key mechanics, Skygunner makes up for it on a few fronts besides just being really fun to play. The first is that the world itself is amazingly charismatic. Reeve is a steampunk paradise full of bright colors, and it has a real painterly quality. The cast of characters is so distinct and charming that I'm outright shocked that somebody didn't scoop up this setting for some type of original video animation. Although, Atlas did put out 4 pre-release comics that can still be found on the official Skygunner website. This charm is no more apparent than with the game's villain, Ventre. He's Robotnik and Tron Bonne rolled into one, and he and his army of poulets are so great. Although I don't think the poulets are actual chickens. Why steal the thing you want when you can just steal the whole museum? Ventre is big and grand. He's a likable villain with tremendous flair, and his presence goes a long way to making the game feel energetic. Bonus points are due for the dangerous aristocrat turned part-time mercenary Reval. He shows up in Ciel's campaign on occasion, and you can tell that his voice actor is having a ton of fun.
Care to indulge me with a little duel? Something wrong, Ciel, you're not yourself today. I guess it will have to suffice.
You can even unlock him as a character and play a small campaign of his own. That's because Skygunner is filled to the brim with unlockables. From additional gunners to a time attack mode and more, Skygunner encourages continued play with a lot of goodies. Even something as small as the game over screens are collectible, and you might just find yourself failing intentionally to see them all. For a game with a brisk playtime, this is a great idea. You can sit down for a session of Skygunner and almost always walk away with something new unlocked. You can even unlock the police chief as an extra gunner, although I'm ashamed to admit that I've never managed to do it. Another thing I greatly appreciate is how the game manages to reuse resources without ever making it seem dull. This is a game that clearly had some sort of limited budget and did the best with it. A great example of this is the machine soldier that crops up in the story. You fight it multiple times as you use all the characters, but each time feels different. As Copan, you have to ram it off the top of a ship. As Femme, you have to destroy its arms in order to prevent a rampage in the city. And at the end of the game, you have to fight it using a lot of coordination with your fellow gunners. Even Reval fights it in his short campaign, but it never feels stale. Skygunner is a game that gets a lot out of everything it uses. Still, Skygunner can seem a little busy from time to time, and possibly a bit too ambitious. But the end result, warts and all, makes it stand out as a really exciting game. There's an unofficial sequel named Gunner's Heart that was released in 2006 by a Japanese doujin company, but other than that, I'm sad to say that we may have seen all there is to see of Skygunner. With a game like Rogue Galaxy being picked up for porting to the PlayStation 4, the door seems wide open for other obscure titles to join its ranks, but I don't have high hopes. If you want to play this game, your best bet is to hunt online or at local shops that sell old titles. If you do pick it up, you'll find a light and romantic anime romp balanced out by technically demanding gameplay, a great soundtrack, and a lush world. It is definitely worth hunting down, and is without a doubt one of the most underrated titles for the PlayStation 2. Alright, so that was it. That was the new start to Let's Remember. I'm so glad you listened. This is a Patreon-backed show. These are all of my wonderful patrons. I'm going to list them all right here as I am talking. And if you are interested in contributing, you can click on this little link right here. Patrons have all sorts of cool benefits, and every little bit of support helps me make this show into the show that I really want it to be. So thank you very much, and I'll see you next month for a mini crit. I love you all. Bye.